Good evening, Nigel. Well, I don't think we should say anything, to be honest. My point was, you're very expert on finances and some things like that. Can you illuminate me as to where this magic money tree that Theresa May is going to get this 40 or 50 billion from?
Oh!
And a second point, what are we going to get in return? Because Theresa May hasn't answered either of those questions.
No, she hasn't, Robert. Well, as it is, given that we're running an annual deficit of circa £50 billion a year, if we have to find an extra £40 billion that was not accounted for, was it, in the Chancellor's budget last week? There was no mention of it in the Chancellor's budget. There was just an extra £3 billion to pay for more border staff, etc. I can only presume, Robert, we will have to borrow it and pay interest on it back over the next 20 or 30 years. What will we get in return? My view is if you show weakness to these people, they come back and ask for more. My guess is we'll get more demands over Ireland. We'll get more demands over the role of the European Court of Justice and their say on the rights of EU citizens living in the United Kingdom. And it would appear, if the Telegraph story is right, it would appear that there's nothing guaranteed in return. And Robert, let me tell you, even if we were guaranteed a free trade deal in return, I would still be saying it is not worth £45 billion. The cost on UK products of tariffs into the European market is about £7 billion every year. And if, Robert, we get on top of a whopping bill, more demands on Ireland, more power for the European Court of Justice, if we're then told we're going to be trapped for 2 years or more in a transition period, during which time all new European law will apply to us as well, frankly, we'll be worse off than if we'd stayed in as a full member. We may legally be headed in the right direction. We may legally leave the European Union on March 29th, 2019, but we're no further forward, Robert. That's what I think.
I quite agree. I think I regard them as the EU mafiosi, and this is like a blackmail demand. And if we give in to this, and can I just make one other point, quick, Nigel? I know you've got a lot of callers. What these Remainers failed to realise, if we have another referendum, we decide to stay in the EU after all, we'll be treated like a doormat by the EU mafia. They'll force us into Euro. They can do what they like to us.
Well, I think
we're totally weak.
To be honest, Robert, we're being treated like a doormat now because they knew that Theresa May was never, ever going to walk away. I do think, Robert, the prospects on a second referendum on EU membership are very remote, and that is because public opinion has firmed up behind Brexit in a very big way. But I think the gap between the governors and the governed is now huge. Robert, I thank you. Peter on Facebook says, why are we doing this anyway? It's harmful to the country. It's harmful to our children. Stop this Brexit nonsense now. Peter, can you imagine what they do to us if we went back and said we want to rejoin? We would have to join the euro. Mr. Juncker made that clear in his State of the Union speech, and we would have to subscribe to the European army. Peter on Facebook, are you seriously suggesting that the British public would want us to do those two things? I don't think so. Magda says, I think we have paid for the EU army, and we are being made to think that it's an outpayment. Magda thinking this money will be used for the EU army. Well, one never knows quite where and how the money gets spent. Least of all, the European Union themselves, who've had a bit of trouble with the auditors for the last 20 years in a row. Please tell me I'm wrong. Tell me it's worth every bean of the 45 billion that the Daily Telegraph say we have agreed in principle to pay as our divorce bill in return for absolutely zip. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. The Daily Telegraph's Peter Foster breaks a story that says he has good sources on both sides, saying that last week we agreed to the Brexit bill and it's going to be around about a cool 45 billion pounds. And if you're driving, just be careful and keep hold of the steering wheel, because it is an astonishing figure, and it is one that will be supported by fewer than 10% of the British population. In return for it, we get virtually nothing. Sang says on Facebook, so guessing we're not getting the 350 million to the NHS then. Doesn't look like it under this Prime Minister, does it? I'm a 19-year-old university student and a Leave voter, and I'm outraged that we are even paying a penny piece, let alone up to 55 billion euros. The government have totally sold out, and the May Davis position now looks untenable. It would be much better to leave without a deal. Well, it would be better to leave without a deal than to have a very, very bad deal. And even if all the other pieces of the jigsaw came into place, my contention is this sum of money simply is not worth it, even if we were guaranteed tariff-free access, which we're not under these current arrangements. If you agree, you disagree, call me on 0345 6060 973, text to 84850, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook and comment there too. I'm going to Paris to Matthew, who's my next caller. Good evening, Matthew.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir. So I bet in the Elysee Palace tonight they go, whoa, come on, the Brits are paying up.
They're all worried about us. But no, basically, I mean, it's going to be worth it. We've got to get to those trade deals so we can see what they're willing to put on the table, what sort of trade deal. But I mean, I see it from your side. I think once we get we start talking the trade, we'll see what sort of trade deal they want to give us, what sort of free trade, how long they're going to be the transition arrangement for the frictionless trade. But then it's going to be Parliament what's going to decide if it's a good or a bad deal, and we've got to get to that point.
And it could be, and Matthew, it could be the European Parliament too, because don't forget, at the end of this process, the European Parliament have a power of veto. So, Matthew, you're of the view, and I think there have been a growing number of people who've been saying, look, OK, if we have to pay something just to get rid of them, just to get it done, then it's worth it. But there is a question, Matthew, of let's just say, and it's not the case, but because there's no guarantee, but let's just say we were guaranteed tariff-free access to the European single market. Would that, in your view, be worth 45 billion sterling?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we get the tariff-free, frictionless trade and we get the control of immigration, what everyone wants, basically we're going to be better off than we are now. So, I mean, that 45 billion could be sort of like, it would have been what we would have been paying maybe for 10 years. And after 10 years, we will be in the position that we'll be better off. But at the same time, it's all the point when we start doing those trade deals with the rest of the world.
Okay. No, you're being pragmatic about it. You're saying, look, we pay a bill and it's job done. And a lot of people would take that view, Matthew, but is 45 billion worth it? That's the question.
Yeah, but I mean, what it is, we've got to see what deal they give us, and then if it's not good enough, what I think what's going to happen is that they're not going to give us a good deal, and I think it's possibly not going to be worth it. But at least we've then seen all their cards, and then what Luke said a couple of weeks ago, we could actually then revoke the Article 50. We won't pay them a penny. And then we do it.
Well, that's obvious. No, that is possible. That is possible down the road. But don't you think, Matthew, that right at this moment in time, it's the EU that appear to have the whip hand, and it's the British government that look very weak indeed?
Well, I mean, they was blackmailed by the DUP, and they're trying to be blackmailed by the EU. But basically, it's the end result what we're after, and it's going to take time. We're not ready to leave March 2019. So if we don't get the right deal, it'll be refused by Parliament. And we'll then revoke.
All right, no, Matthew, fine. No, Matthew's made the argument that it may be a thumping sum of money, but if it solves all the other problems, it may be worth it. Absolutely disgraceful. She has no right to spend our money like this. We want out now and a new Prime Minister, I get, anonymously. We've been sold down the river, Nigel. I'm so disappointed. I knew what I was voting for when I voted Leave. I don't appreciate being told that I am thick. A lot of people feel like this. And on Twitter I get, you should be blooming ashamed of yourself for the mess you have created. Thank you, Niall. Listen, matey, I haven't agreed to 45 billion. I would never have agreed to 45 billion. I did, by the way, volunteer to try and help the government with their negotiations. I can see now why they would never, ever, ever would have wanted me. Paul says on Twitter, just walk away. It's ridiculous if it's true. Well, we do have to caveat if it's true. But Peter Foster from the Daily Telegraph has really stuck his neck out on this one. And do you know what? Given that secret war cabinet meeting last week, I do think this has quite a bit of believability. Jeanette says, why the hell are the Ramonas blaming you, Nigel? It's the government that are destroying this country. Well, whether they're destroying the country or not, Jeanette, they certainly are prepared to pay very large sums of money to, as I see them, the bad boys of Brussels. David is a new caller from Croydon. David, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. I think you've caused all this mess.
Thank you.
That we've got ourselves.
That's very sweet of you, David.
No, I voted Brexit, but now I realise the implications. And I've spoken to a lot of people like me who voted Brexit would vote Remain now, knowing what this has caused. Because at the end of the day, we've got ourselves into a complete mess. And what has they? You know, you made it sound like we could just, it would just be something that would just, we could just exit from, and there wouldn't be any problems. Or if there were, we could just walk away.
We can.
We can't.
We can. No, David. David, we're not a hostage. We shouldn't be paying a ransom fee. We can, if we wish, just walk away.
Yeah, but you're not in charge of the negotiation.
I know.
It's all very well for you to say that, but we've got other people that may be kowtowing or capitulating.
Because they never believed in it, and because we have at least 17 of our cabinet that were, and still I think are, Remainers. David, what would you have done?
Well, knowing what the situation is now, I would have voted Remain. Because it's better the devil,
well, David, that can be your view, but accept that it's a minority view, and accept that a lot more people have gone the other way just in the course of the last few weeks. We're even getting popular culture figures from the left, Noel Gallagher, people like that saying just get on with it. Morrissey at the weekend talking about it as a liberation. Even Robert Peston, the lovey of the media seen in London, saying Brexit voters were on the right side of history. So, David, I understand your reluctance, but I suggest to you that Brexit, which you voted for, is looking tough because of the way the government are handling it.
Well, I just think that they may be agreeing, get on with it, but that's what we've got to do now. We're just stuffed with it. So, I just think it's all very well saying that they're saying get on with it. But I know a lot of people that would have voted Remain. They would have changed their...
Well, they're in a very small minority, David, and a lot of opinion polling says that. David, feeling it's all a bit too difficult now. They're making the rules up as they go along, and we are giving into them. It's embarrassing. 45 billion, what a joke. We have the wrong Prime Minister for the job. Her heart is not in it, says Mez in Preston. Mez, I couldn't agree more. She doesn't believe in it. Goodness me, she made that clear enough, didn't she, to Ian Dale a few weeks ago on LBC when he asked her, how would you vote if there's a referendum now? And she couldn't bring herself to answer the question. Ross from Birmingham is a new caller to the show. What do you think, Ross?
Nigel, it's a joke. You understand? They should call you Sir Nigel, They should give you a lot of credit.
Well, they won't do that in a hurry, Ross, but they won't do that in a hurry. But so you think this whole thing's a joke, yeah?
Yeah, it's a joke. My parents is part of the Commonwealth, yeah?
Yeah.
Why England is giving the European Union in this system for 40 years? The Commonwealth is like hundreds of years. Why are they bound to Europe? I can't get it. And it peed me off. Theresa May is a waste of time.
Ross, you couldn't be really clearer, could you, in your views? And by the way, can I just say that I think a lot of people like you from Commonwealth families voted Brexit. I remember the week after Brexit at a petrol station in Croydon, and there was a car there, and a Jamaican-born family were in the car, and the lady wound down the window, and she said to me, she said, Nigel, do you think our countries could be friends again? And I thought, wow, I know so much of the Commonwealth felt betrayed by us being part of the European Union. We've got a wonderful opportunity, Russ, to reach out to those 52 countries. You know, we've got so much in common. I agree with you through history, through culture. But I'm afraid, Russ, it's going to take a long time to get there, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's not hard, Nigel. People like you can make it happen. Boris Johnson, he's weak too. I'm surprised at that guy. All of them is a bunch of, I can't say it on the radio, they're a bunch of ex-wives.
Okay, fair enough. Ross, lots of passion there. I'm afraid I can't do much about it. I can comment on it, I can talk about it, I can write about it, but Theresa May is in charge. Ross, thank you. Great call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. We're being told by Peter Foster of the Daily Telegraph that in principle we've agreed to pay about £45 billion as our Brexit divorce bill. And yet none of us have been shown any figures of what the government thinks we owe the European Union, or indeed what the European Union owes us. And I think that perhaps is very frustrating. Also, there is at this stage no guarantee of anything in return. I wonder which of you out there, who of you listening to this show, would offer a big sum of money without knowing whether you were going to get anything in return for it? You're preying on the goodwill of somebody else. And so far, I have to say, in my opinion, they haven't showed much goodwill. This is weakness by the British government. It's sellout. And it's also a reluctance. They were never, ever going to walk away from this negotiating table, and yet they could have done. Caroline on Facebook says she's committed to this huge payment without even having a deal yet. Bonkers. And that's how I feel. Others, of course, think it's all completely my fault, and I'd be very disappointed if they didn't. Matt says, you've sold everyone a pup. You're now trying to blame everybody else. Now it's blowing up in your face. No, Matt, we do not legally need to pay this money. It is madness. I can understand a sensible negotiation about what we owe them and we owe us. This is crackers. This is not worth the money, and it wouldn't be worth the money even if a deal was guaranteed in return. Colin, another new caller from Finchley, is on my line. Colin, what do you make of it?
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
Nigel, one thing I've learned in my 69 years on God's earth,
Yep.
Your first loss is your best loss with anything you do, right? If you're losing money.
If things are going wrong, Colin, that's often the case, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's wipe your mouth and start again and see what happens. You see, what's going on here now is that it's all right giving them the money, but you want to know what you're getting in return. If you invest any of your money, you want a return for your money.
Yep.
Now, if we're not going to get a return on our money, well, we're better off we walk and wait until they get pressure from the business people in Europe. And believe you me, they'll get it, because Mercedes are not going to walk away from us. BMW are not going to walk away. All these big companies who invested millions of pounds into this country are not going to walk. So we've really got to see what we're going to get for our money. You've got to pay, but it's an investment, so that's what they've got to do. What are you going to give us for what we're going to pay you?
I mean, Colin, it's possible that the Telegraph haven't got the full story. It's possible that what the British government have said is we will pay this sum of money at the end of all of this if there is a trade deal. There could be a huge caveat in there, and yet, you know, from his conversations with both sides of this negotiation, that detail hasn't emerged. Colin, if there was something in return, if there was a guarantee in return for this sum of money, then you and I could have a conversation as to whether it's worth it. And I would still argue, Colin, that 45 billion was way too much and wasn't worth it. But your general principle that no one in life does a deal unless they know, or makes an offer unless they know what they're getting for it, I think is absolutely right and good, practical, common sense. Brendan is calling from Droitwich in the Midlands. Brendan, good evening.
And good evening to you, Nigel. I mean, you can't believe I'm absolutely incandescent with these talks. We shouldn't be paying them anything. We first of all should establish their accounts, because apparently they've not been audited forever. We should tell them to tell us how they arrive at this figure and wonder
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, but we've done none of it, have we?
Before we go any further, want to know what we're going to get for it. And I think it's absolutely outrageous to talk about 45 billion. It's outrageous to talk about giving them anything without the accounts being settled.
Well, it's true that for the last 21 years in a row, the EU accounts have not been fully signed off by the auditors because several billion each year seems to go missing. And that is true. But Brendan, I mean, would you, if there was a tariff-free deal in return, would it be worth us paying something for it?
It might be, but I'd want to know exactly what we were going to get without, sort of, this may happen, this may happen. We don't do anything until we know we got what we're going to get out of it. It's madness. Mrs. May was madness when she was as Home Secretary, and she was madness calling an election with a manifesto that was virtually suicidal, and now she's talking about giving billions of our money away.
Would you like to see her gone as Prime Minister, Brendan?
I would, but I'm not sure who would like to replace it apart from you.
You wouldn't want... That's very kind of you. You wouldn't want Mr Corbyn, would you?
Well, that's the only...
Or maybe you would.
No, I definitely wouldn't like Mr Corbyn. We'd be bankrupt within 5 years.
What, you mean he'd pay more than 45 billion?
He'd pay anything.
So where are they going to get this 45 billion from?
Where's we're going to get it from?
Yeah.
God knows.
Yeah,
we're bankrupt as it is. We owe money. I don't know what the national debt stands at the moment.
1.73 trillion.
Well, there you are. So what? Well, what does it matter?
Well, just borrow a bit more. Billion? Yeah, who cares? It's not their money anyway. Brendan, I thank you for your call. Brendan, incandescent there from Droitwich in the West Midlands. Funny how Theresa May cuts public services but can borrow billions to give to the EU. I get on Twitter, 45 billion, what a joke. We are rolling over without even a fight. Weak government. They will keep on stamping on us until we grow a spine, says Simon on Twitter. Mick from Dagenham says, I can't believe that a bunch of very bright and gifted people are doing so badly in negotiations. So they probably aren't. And it's just too easy for you and the others to say that they are doing badly when none of you are party to the same discussions. Well, OK, Mick, you could argue that. So why doesn't she? Why haven't they at any point explained any of this to the British public? Because, as I said earlier, it's been like a secret game of poker going on between David Davis and Michel Barnier without us seeing any of the cards or being made privy to any of those conversations. And I think that would have been really, really useful. I wonder what Idris thinks, who's calling from Hendon. Idris, good evening.
Good evening, how are you, all right?
Well, I know, I'm really angry. I mean, I just cannot understand. I cannot understand, Idris, how or why we should give away a vast sum of money.
We should be angry with you because you were so quick to get everybody out of it. As soon as they walked out, as soon as they get out, you just jumped like a mouse, ran off.
Where did I run to, Idris?
Sorry?
Where did I run to?
Well, you left the party. You left your
no, I didn't.
Party.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you left. You
no, I didn't. No, I didn't.
You left the party.
No, I didn't.
You got everybody out of the EU.
Oh dear, dear, dear. Poor old Idris. You're suffering under desperate misapprehensions. Oh, I haven't left the party. I'm still leading. The group in the European Parliament.
We've got no choice then to just come out of it and pay half of it and that's it. Get out of it.
So, do you think, Idris? Do you think that it's worth it if it gets us a clean break from the European Union?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't. We need to get out a clean break because, I voted to stay in because at the end of the day, everybody's happy and the economy was booming as well and then, everybody was happy at the time. But then when everybody voted to come out, everybody was shocked. They didn't realise the only people who voted to come out was the old generation and didn't realise what they were voting for. The people like yourself never actually explained to anybody regarding about...
Idris, they knew exactly what they were voting for. They were voting to take back control of our country, our lives, our borders, our fishing grounds. They were voting not to go on giving large sums of money to the European Union. And that, Idris, I think, is why a lot of people tonight are pretty angry about this. But tell me, you were a Remain voter, but you take the view we need to get a clean break and move on. What sum of money do you think would be worth it?
I mean, do you know what? For me, I just walk out of it and that's it. That's what I would do.
Would you? Right, Idris, thank you. Isn't it interesting that we get people who voted Brexit who are now a little bit worried about it, and we get people who voted Remain who are even more hardline than me? But actually, I think we have reached the point where maybe walking away is the right thing. I'm a 34-year-old Brexiteer and one of your biggest fans. I've heard of our selfishness, which I fully understand, but can I ask, what will Europe do with our money? Will it sustain smaller EU countries that have depended upon us, says Neil in Littlehampton? Well, I very much doubt, Neil, we will know where any of this money goes. I tell you what I think this is really all about, right? Us leaving the European Union takes away 16% of their budget contributions every single year. They are in a hell of a fiddle over this. At the moment, they're kind of saying, just because Britain leaves the European Union, we won't reduce our budget. So that would mean, of course, wouldn't it, other member states having to pay more. Maybe what they're trying to do here is to try and get 4 or 5 years of our net contribution to soften the blow for absolutely everybody else. I can't think why they're as arrogant as this. I mean, if you have a company that has an annual marketing budget and your income next year is 30% lower than it was this year, you may have to cut your marketing budget. You may have to cut your, entertaining budget. You may even have to cut your staff. You have to cut your cloth, accordingly to fit you. The European Union seem to have no intention of doing that. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. The Telegraph reveal that it's been agreed. We're going to pay £45 billion to leave the European Union, and I'm asking you whether you think it's worth it. I don't, particularly as there's no deal of any kind guaranteed in return. And breaking news, North Korea has launched a ballistic missile, according to reports. South Korea's military has said the missile was fired from an area north of Pyongyang early on Wednesday local time. The Yonhap news agency reported South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff saying that it and US authorities are analysing the trajectory. A US official also said that the launch had taken place. And you can keep across this story with LBC, and Donald Trump will be doing a press conference in 15 to 20 minutes' time. Back to 45 billion. Jamie on Twitter feels very strongly about this. He says we should pay the EU absolutely nothing because on June the 23rd we voted a breakaway. We shouldn't be considering any payment whatsoever. Question. If the EU in the second stage offer a lousy trade deal, can the 50 billion euros be taken off the table? The figure is absolutely mind-blowing, says Tommy. Well, you'd have thought so, Tommy. Given the weakness of our leaders, I have absolutely no idea at all. I wonder what Jenny, a new caller from Stamford in Lincolnshire, thinks. Jenny, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I have got 2 points to make, which I feel very strongly about. I've been going and living in France for the past 30 years.
Uh-huh.
I do get first-hand how the French feels about the British. And I generally get we don't like the Brits at all because they think that we think we're better than them. Yeah.
What do you mean? Sorry, Jenny, you're saying the French think we're arrogant?
Yes. Very much so. And I asked because obviously I live in England, I go to France, I've got 2 sisters there who are married to French, and I do ask their friends, family, colleagues, and they say they think we're arrogant, or sometimes I get because they killed Joan of Arc, which is not even true.
Hang on, that's not true, is it?
It's not, because it was sold by the French priest, was sold to British, but that's a different story.
Right. I mean, Jenny, we love a bit of historical context, but back to Joan of Arc. Wow.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's what that's the reason they give us. The point that I wanted to make is Theresa May is so focused on what EU thinks about her instead of thinking what her nation thinks about her. She's focused more on what to do best for them than she thinks what should be best for us here.
What, to be popular on the international stage, yeah?
So I don't agree that. I don't think we should pay a penny whatsoever because the French sees us. I know, like I said, I live there. I've got family. I go 2 or 3 times a year, I'm actually bilingual. I speak fluent French as well. So I do kind of mingle a lot when I go across. And they should not receive a penny at all.
No, well, Jenny, it's a very strong point of view, and it's one that is held by many people. I was amused by your comment about the French thinking we're arrogant. If anybody out there in Britain or France wants lessons in arrogance, I understand after Brexit, Monsieur Barnier is opening up an arrogant school because, goodness me, he just about takes the biscuit. Jenny, I thank you. Will from Evesham, who's a regular caller to the show and a Remain supporter. So, Will, how do you feel about 45 billion?
Yeah, I think the disingenuity here, Nigel, happened during the referendum. I didn't hear anybody talking about the leaving bill.
Quite.
We are leaving a social club. This isn't a sports club. Oh, by the way, I'm going to cancel my membership. I'm going to lose next month. This is a significant relationship, long-term investment. Britain's benefited massively from inward investment from the EU into our...
yeah, but it was our money, wasn't it?
Sorry?
It was our money.
Hang on. Let's get the figures, Nigel. Whose net benefits? I'm sure you're in the calculations. Britain is a net benefactor from the EU.
No, Will. No, Will, please.
Hang on.
Please. No, come on. Look, we can argue about numbers, and you can argue about money that came to rich landowners, or to universities, or to regional aid, but we've been a net contributor every single year since 1973.
I'm talking about specific investment in areas like Cornwall, in Wales. Yeah, we're identified as focus areas. Britain has benefited massively from EU investment, and the idea, but that was never discussed in the referendum.
Well, let's agree to disagree on that, right? Because I'm saying we've been a net contributor since 1973, and you look at certain areas that have received money. But you're quite right. Nobody in the referendum discussed a divorce bill. David Cameron didn't discuss a divorce bill, and Boris certainly didn't discuss a divorce bill, because everyone knew that under Article 50 we had no legal obligation whatsoever to pay a penny piece. And Will, I've argued, as you know, you listen to this show, you engage in this show, I've argued we should meet any commitments that we'd said, we were going to be responsible for, which is spending up until the end of 2020, but in return they owe us some money. What frustrates me, Will, is I've not seen from Barnier or from David Davis or Mrs May, nobody has attempted to explain any figures to us, have they?
Well, hang on. If we're talking about figures, all right, I remember you during a referendum, talk about Project Fear. That was a phrase that dropped off your lips every other day. Project Fear.
Housing prices to collapse, foreign direct investment to decline, us to be left out in the cold. Yeah, there was plenty of it.
In the last 2 days, the OBR gave us the worst forecast since 1983. Rees-Mogg said, exaggeration. OECD, I've just come and said it's worse. All right? So, and I specifically point to Brexit. This is not Project Fear. You and the kind of...
Well... These are, OECD, Will, is part of the international globalist club, so we're not surprised about them. Let us hope, for every reason, that the OBR are wrong. I do see one problem overhanging the British economy. I've been mentioning it on this show for the last week or two, and I was surprised to see that for once I'm in agreement with Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs said the biggest threat overhanging the British economy is not Brexit, though that worries some. It is the prospect of Corbyn and McDonnell and a hard left anti-business government. And that, I think, in terms of business, is an even bigger threat. But, Will, let me just ask you. We voted to leave. You were dead against it. What do you think we should pay to leave?
Well, that's not really the issue.
I know, it is the issue. That's exactly what we're discussing. I'm asking you, is 45 billion worth it?
I thought it was a talk show, not a dictator show.
Do you... Well, the question, Will, that every caller is attempting to answer is 45 billion worth it?
I think what we should pay. I think we should say to them, you know what, we don't want to go. We can say it's economic platform. We're going to say 45 billion. But just to follow on your point...
Well, Will, come on, Will. Now, look, Will, fewer than 10%... Fewer than 10% of the population think we should pay 45 billion. No, Will, you can't. When I have a debate And I ask people to tell me that we shouldn't leave the European Union. You'll be top of the queue. But I'm asking, given that we are leaving, and given that now a very big, settled will of the people majority want us to leave, what is the right figure? Well, as ever, I've given you a good go. I always do. Jamie is my last caller of the evening. He's a new caller of the show, and he's from Ware in Hertfordshire. What do you make of it, Jamie?
Hello, Nigel. I'd just like to... well, this might be wishful thinking on my part, but I wonder if, in actual fact, what we've seen is the very beginning or the first step of no deal. And the reason that we've offered this money is because we're well aware that we'll never have to pay it. I think politically, Theresa May is in a very difficult position. First, she has to be able to hear what the other side are actually offering in terms of the Irish border, and particularly in terms of trade. But I wonder if in the negotiations that have taken place so far, they realise that the Europeans are being so unreasonable that a deal that will satisfy them can never be struck. And the only way she can justify walking away from the negotiations is by allowing the Europeans to demonstrate to everybody just how unreasonable they're being.
Well, Jamie, I love that line of argument, and I absolutely hope and pray that you're right. But Jamie, the trouble is, she did it in Florence. She offered 20 billion. She thought she was being generous. They said it's not good enough. Now she's offering 45. So, Jamie, it's a great thought. You know, be reasonable, show how wholly unreasonable they are. But hey, we've been playing that game for a long time already. Jamie, I thank you. I thank all of you for taking part in this. I think it's an outrageous sum of money. We shouldn't be paying it, even if there was a deal guaranteed, which there is not. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 7. Coming up tonight at 10 o'clock, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.